Okay, so asexuality is sometimes known as the hidden orientation, and we did have a bit of a laugh at the Asexualities conference a few weeks ago, because Dominic had given us all, if we wanted to, we could take coloured stickers to show different identities, and the one that was picked, it wasn't Dominic's choice, but the one that was picked for Asexualities was a white square, and there were white name badges, and so again, you had to peer really hard to see anybody else who was wearing a white sticker. So once again, it was hidden. But the question that a lot of people ask is, how do you know you don't like it if you haven't tried it? So asexuality is sometimes described as a sexual orientation, and sometimes it's described as a meta-category to go alongside sexuality. So sexuality and the different sexual orientations, and asexuality, because there's something similar and something's different. So the most commonly accepted definition of asexuality is that an asexual person is someone who has low or no sexual attraction for other people. That's the most commonly used one, and it was, if you look online, the biggest online community is AVEN, the Asexuality, Visibility and Education Network, and that's the definition that they use. So it's not about behaviour, it's not about fantasies, it's about attraction specifically. I think it's also one of the most widely used definitions because it's one that was coined by asexual people themselves, those who actually identify as asexual, so describing themselves. So for asexual people, everything works normally. There's no sexual dysfunction. All the bits work, to use someone's phrase. Men still get erections, women still get aroused in the normal way. Everybody can have orgasms unless there's some other problem. So it's not to do with the body. Hormone levels are usually normal, so it's not to do with hormone levels. Although that's something that there's, again, often said to asexual people, you should get your hormones checked. So you could say that on one level it's a choice, as any sexual behaviour is a choice. But on another level it's really not a choice. It's, for those who would, it's an essentialist point of view, I don't know. But it is something deeper than just, I'm making a choice not to be sexual. So it's different to abstinence or celibacy, which would imply that there is an attraction there and I'm choosing not to act on it. Again, another question, something a lot of people say, is that there are many people who go through periods of life when they're not sexual, either because of age or illness or disability or just choice. But I think that's different to asexuality, which is much more of an enduring situation. It can be fluid, but it's much more of an enduring position. Not just that sex isn't important right now. And it's not, really importantly, it's not a result of trauma, sexual trauma or otherwise. Again, that's one of the most commonly levelled accusations, if you like, at asexual people. If you get your trauma sorted out, then you'll be fine. But there are many people who experience sexual trauma who aren't asexual, and there are many people who are not all asexual people who've experienced any kind of sexual trauma. For me, I think something that sets asexuality apart is that sexuality isn't something that I would use to connect with other people. So I can connect emotionally, I'm connecting in lots of other ways with other people, but sexuality doesn't come into, sex doesn't come into it. So I think that's something we can think about as therapists. If we're trying to discern this person that I'm talking to, might they be asexual or might they have some other problem? Is sex included in their way that they would like to connect with people or not, if that makes sense. Sex may even get in the way of connecting with people. For example, a lot of asexual people do masturbate, they have sex on their own, but it usually wouldn't involve, or probably doesn't involve, imagining or fantasising about another person. And in fact, if you try and bring another person into the fantasy or into the imagination, it might kind of detract from any kind of sexual pleasure. I say probably because there's so little research being done that nobody actually knows. I think I've read probably 80% of the papers that have ever been written on asexuality, and to date I haven't found another paper written by anybody who's a therapist. I found sociological research, I found psychological research, but not therapeutic research. So we say probably because we just don't know. A lot of it's down to anecdotes and chatting online. So some asexual people do have sex with other people, and some are quite happy to do that, but it probably doesn't have much meaning for them. If in a relationship you may have sex with someone because it's for the other person's sake, much perhaps like in a relationship one might take the garbage out because it's got to be done. So I'll get on and do with it. I don't find any pleasure in it, but it needs to be done, so I'll do it because I care about you. Some have sex with others and don't enjoy it. Some have sex with others and do enjoy it. But again, it's about the attraction. So the behaviour might be there, but there isn't necessarily sexual attraction. It makes me think of the old days when a lot of women in England were told just to lie back and think of England, and let your husband do what he wants to do to you. Anyway, yes, let's move on. So some asexual people would say they're sex neutral. That is, they could tolerate sex, they can have sex, and some are sex averse. So they actually get quite grossed out by the idea of sex. I'm going to be completely honest with you. For me, the idea of having sex is you want to put what, where. I don't think so. There's just something, I'm not revolted by it, I'm not disgusted by it. But it's just something that does not, why would anyone do that? Why would you want to do that? I just don't get it. Why would you want to do that? Some asexual people would identify as what they call grey asexual or demisexual, and you'll find that the asexual community are developing all kinds of vocabulary to describe, to have a common language to talk about their experiences. So the more commonly accepted definition of grey A or grey asexual is somebody whose sexual attraction is so low as to be negligible and almost not noticeable. So it might as well not be there, but they do experience a little bit sometimes. And demisexual would be to describe somebody who has a certain amount of sexual attraction, but only after there's a very strong emotional bond formed with somebody. There's no sexual attraction outside of a very strong emotional commitment to somebody. But these definitions, they're all just accepted common usage rather than particularly strict. Sexual attraction and romantic attraction are different for asexual people. Sexual attraction may be absent, but romantic attraction might still be there. So the idea of having a romantic relationship with somebody and a very intimate relationship with somebody might still be very attractive. But some asexuals would also describe themselves as aromantic. In other words, there is no desire whatsoever to have any kind of intimate, romantic kissing, cuddling, being together with somebody else. Some would say that they're homoromantic, so they're asexual, but they would feel a romantic attraction to people of the opposite gender. Same, sorry. Or heteroromantic, biromantic. And again, this is language which is just developing to try and describe experiences. Another word that's coming out is people have squishes rather than crushes. A squish being some kind of emotional attraction. Oh, yes, I quite like that person. But there's nothing sexual about it, it's just a squish, not a crush. But if you look online, you can find pages and pages of language which is developing almost every week. And sometimes I read it and I think, oh, really? Please. Can't just use normal words. I almost have to learn a whole new language to describe myself. So the asexual community, I think, is quite hard to be part of. It's quite a new community, and it came about really because from 2001, an American guy called David J. formed an online forum, Avon, which is, as I said, it's the biggest online community. But because it's online, it's a virtual community, it's quite hard to meet other asexual people. Just to tell a bit more about myself, I first heard the word asexual, I'm 53 now, and I first heard the word asexual when I was 45. So for the first 45 years of my life, I had no word to describe. I didn't know that how I did life was a way that anybody else did life. So I heard the word and thought, that's a bit weird. And then I was doing a taught masters at Edinburgh University and did a taught course on sexualities and genders. And in a 40-hour taught course, we had, I think it was about 3 minutes, in which the word asexuality was mentioned, and the speaker explained it, and somebody in the class said, "You mean there are people like that and they're not lying?" And I realised how angry I was when I heard that comment, because I thought, how dismissive is that? And I thought, don't like that. So that term I wrote my term paper on asexuality to try and explore it a bit. And that's when I first decided that actually I'm being dishonest if I don't describe myself as asexual. So through Avon, this online community, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, how do you find a community defined by an absence of something? You know, so how do you find other people that don't eat toast, for example? Do you go around saying, do you eat toast? Do you eat toast? Eat toast. It's not something, particularly to do with sex, it's not something you talk about, like in that way, with people that you don't know very well. There are no, as far as I know, there are no asexual clubs anywhere. There's just this online community, which not everyone fits into. It's very American-centric, I find, and it's very young person-centric. So I don't find much in common with the people I meet there. They're talking about things that I'm like, whatever. Avon also organise, Avon doesn't organise, people in the network organise local meetups. And in Scotland we have one meetup, which happens one Saturday a month, also between Glasgow and Edinburgh. The first one I went to was 3 years ago, so when I was in my 50th year. That was the first time I ever knowingly met another asexual person. And I was absolutely fascinated, because all this time I'd been gradually identifying myself as asexual, but still had no notion what anybody else might be like. So it was a huge kind of gulp factor when I went to Central Station and stood outside WH Smith's and thought, how will I know who they are? Will they be wearing labels across their foreheads? I'm not sexual. But there were 7 of us at the meetup. I was the oldest by 25 years. The rest were all students or of student age. So it's something that younger people are much more aware of. People of my age, generally speaking, still have never heard of the idea. I've met one other woman my own age in Scotland who's asexual. She's been married 3 times, each time hoping that the new husband would be the one that would awaken her sexuality. And it never happened. So it's not a community that's easy to find, and it's not a community that's necessarily easy to have much in common with. So of these 7 people at the first meetup I went to, one person I think had met another asexual person, knowingly met another asexual person outside of the group. And I think only one, maybe 2 of them, had actually come out to their families. For the rest, it was very much me and my private world, because I'm not quite sure how to say this to other people. I have told friends, when I discovered asexuality, I'm thinking, at last, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm not broken, I'm not deficient in some way, and tried to kind of share the good news with people, and was decidedly underwhelmed with the response, because no one has a clue what to do with it. No one has a clue what to say to you next, or anything like that. So, yes. Many asexuals, particularly those over a certain age, who perhaps aren't so internet connected, have never heard of asexuality. The figures are roughly 1.04% of the population may be asexual. And if you imagine that perhaps of that 1%, maybe over half of them have never heard the word asexual other than to do with worms. It's not a community that's easy to be part of. It's hard to find one another and connect. To this date, I have never yet met another therapist who is asexual. So that's hence my question about what am I missing in the therapy room. There's no one to compare notes with. So, but the world is sexual normative. You've probably all seen the video Homo World. I think it's on the key, isn't it? And that's a really good way of identifying, gosh, just how heteronormative the world is. But if you imagine that, the world being a sexual normative place, then for asexual people, often you are confronted day after day after day after day after day, and you don't even notice just how much the influence of society is about sex and sexuality. So that's quite a tough thing, because if it's an asexual person, you don't notice it. Nevertheless, you're accepting it as normal. This is what normal looks like, and I'm not normal. So I don't think most of us are really aware just how universal society thinks sexuality is. So if you're part of the 1% that for whom it's not normal. I think for me it just became internalized as I'm not like others, and I hope that I don't have to be. I don't really want to be like everybody else and do that. But on the other hand, there's clearly something wrong with me. So it becomes internalized as shame. So in the therapy room, when I came on the summer school 2 years ago, it was a huge relief to me to hear the two concepts of internalized depression and shame and hypervigilance, because suddenly I could identify just how noticeable those things are amongst those that I know who identify as myself, identifying as asexual. You're constantly looking to see how people are reacting to you. Have they noticed? Did I laugh convincingly at that joke, even though I have no idea what the joke was about? Did I get away with this, and so on. Most therapists have never heard of asexuality. Pink therapy is the exception. I don't think I've yet noticed another educational body in the realms of therapy that is taking seriously asexuality. So I don't know how many therapists there are in the UK or in the world, but I wonder how many of them have any idea. Certainly I've had to educate everyone I've met. My supervisor, my first therapist, God bless him, talking to him, when I first came across the concept, I said to him, can we talk about this? And I am a survivor of child sexual abuse. And he said, oh, don't define yourself, let's wait and see what happens when you go through therapy, let's wait and see what wakes up in you. And 3 years later, I was still twiddling my fingers thinking, can we not talk about this? Okay, he said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I have no idea. I just know that I need to talk about it. And he said, well, where should we start? And I said, well, if I'm asexual, rather than broken or deficient or there's something wrong with me, then that changes everything. I look at my past and all the things that I've interpreted as being wrong with me or broken or somehow not normal, it's all okay. And that's huge. And he said, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I said, yes, it's a good thing, but it's an enormous thing. It's an absolutely enormous thing. So at that point, I decided to change my therapist. Though he'd been very good, he wasn't coping with that, bless him. My supervisor has been fantastic. She's educated herself along with me. But even on bad days, she still says, but Jo, if you hadn't been abused, don't you think that you wouldn't have been asexual? So we don't go there. But if you think of those reactions, I'm so ahead of myself. That for clients coming to the therapy room, if their therapist has never heard of asexuality and the client themselves has only the vaguest notion that it exists, that goes on to compound the shame and the hypervigilance and everything else. So we could unwittingly be colluding with all of those things. So moving on quickly, shame, not getting jokes. There are many times when I wonder what a particular word is a euphemism for. And recently someone wrote on one of the Avon forums, does anyone know what letters is a euphemism for? Because I think I missed something the other day. And so that's a common thing, to hear jokes and anecdotes and not quite get it. Something else that for many asexual people, they don't notice when someone's flirting with them. I can sit in a room and I can watch people flirting and know that that's what they're doing. But if it's happening to me, if it's directed at me, I don't even know. I don't get it at all. And I've discovered that's common for a lot of people, a lot of asexual people. Not knowing that the notion of asexuality exists, most have at least heard of other sexual orientations before they reach puberty, except asexuality. So there are many people growing up asexual who don't even know that it's possible. Self-image, no one's flirting with me, or I'm not noticing it, so I must be not desirable, not likeable, not attractive, and that becomes internalized as shame. Feeling isolated, confused, and avoiding potentially difficult situations. I can remember as a teenager, and my friends were kind of going to parties and talking about boys, and because that's what you did in those days, is a long time ago. And I would avoid those situations because I didn't feel like I could convincingly be there and be true to me. So, and I just frigid. In the media, there's sometimes a gentle mocking of virginity. So an asexual person who has not lost their virginity, there's this message coming towards you that you're weird, you're different. There are lots of stereotypes. These aren't exclusive to asexuality, but they are things that I notice. Male stereotypes around sexual conquest, female stereotypes about desirability, wanting to pass as normal, pretending to join in, laughing when I don't get the jokes, pretending to like someone, feeling socially inept and marginalised. Many social situations, when there's a lot of banter going on, can be I find quite isolating, because I can't join in, so I feel kind of on the edge of things. Unfortunately, often not accepted by the LGBT community. I've come across that many times. Just little comments, but at least no one sends you hate mail. But at least you're not wanting to do something. It's not about what you're doing, it's about what you're not doing. So that's okay, isn't it? And trying to be included in something that for everybody else is central to life, sex and sexuality. How on earth do you find yourself included in that? So here are some of the things that people say to their asexual friends. You must have been sexually abused as a child. It's great that you're saving yourself for your partner. You just haven't met the right person yet. You can't be asexual if you're a virgin, if you haven't done it. You can't be asexual if you masturbate. Get your hormones checked. It's a phase, you'll grow out of it. Some variation, you haven't met the right person yet. Sorry, I've got ahead of myself. I could fix you, just give me a chance. There's a big issue in the asexual blogs and so on about rape culture and corrective rape, and people being encouraged to have sex because that will sort them out in various communities, and that's something that asexual people are getting quite vocal against. You're secretly gay. Asexuality is just an excuse for ugly people. You're just shy or scared, again an excuse. You've no idea what you're missing. There's a pill for that. You should see a therapist. I came out to a group of friends who I thought, just a small group, we were having lunch together, and I kind of gently said something, and one of them, who's a GP, leapt straight in, "Joe, no, it's okay, go and see your doctor, get your hormones, there's something she can give you for that." And I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You can. And the immediate thing was, this is a problem, let's fix it, let's solve it, let's get rid of it. So if you do have asexual clients who come into the therapy room, what kind of things might they want to talk about? And again, this is not research, this is just anecdotal stuff from the Avon forums, the kind of things that people bring up there often. How do you come out as asexual? When do you tell a partner you think you're asexual? There's a big issue if you're in a relationship. What do you do about your partners, if your partner's sexual? How do they negotiate their sexual needs? Are you happy for them to go and have sex with somebody else? Are you willing to have sex with them? There's some big issues around that. How to tell others that you're asexual. Children. If you want to have children, how do you go about having children or not having them? How do you feel about that? Wanting some kind of queer platonic partnership, which we don't even have a word for, by the way. All the relationships and partnerships we talk about automatically, by definition, seem to be assumed to include sex. And we can say friendships, but does that really describe a really strong, intense, intimate relationship? And how do you find someone with whom you can have that kind of relationship? Frustration with the over-sexualization of the world at large. Everybody else is obsessed by sex. And what do I do with that? How do I deal with the idea of sex, masturbation, using porn, and so on? What do I do with all of that stuff? Nudity and aversion to it. Some asexual people have difficulty with touch as well. Sexual touch and aversion to it. Sex repulsion. Stigma. Many people still carry the stigma that they've taken before they heard the word identified as asexual. Being cold, frigid, weird, or so on. Those things can go very deep and be quite hard to rethink. Mixed relationships with a sexual person. How do you compromise in relationships? Dating in general. And frustration at having to educate everyone you meet about who you are and how your world works. And loneliness. Again, because of the difficulty of meeting people with whom you can form lasting, strong, intimate friendships. And I think that's it. Thank you.